everyone. Welcome
Hello.
to Coacharya's webinar today. As you're joining us for this webinar today, do let us know where in the world you're joining us from. And also an invitation for all of you to share with us what are you most curious about today. As you're entering this session, maybe it'll be good for all of us to know what you're curious about. Please type your comments in the chat box. We would love to hear from all of you. Now, today is the Coacharya Trainers Showcase webinar, and some of you would know that we're going to be talking about fascination and uncertainty and curiosity in coaching, which is also why I asked you the question. But before we delve into the discussion, I would like to quickly announce two programs which I think would be a great value add for the Coacharya community. One is the Mega ICF Level 2 program with 4 trainers. Two of them are present with us today, Tracy and Smita. The other 2 trainers would be Drevan and Prakash. And each trainer in this program is going to be bringing something special. So if you're interested in this course, please reach out to our team to register for it. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us at support@coacharya.com. I will be putting all the links and the details in the chat box shortly. The other program is the Mega Level 2, is the ACTC program, which is coming up on 5th September. So if you are somebody who has been looking to get trained in team coaching and work towards their ACTC credential, then this program is for you. And this is with 7 trainers. All of them are experts in their field. So please do head to our website and check out all our upcoming programs. With that, I will pass it on to Tracy to carry the conversation forward. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Oh. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And before we begin, let's have a little fun. We're going to go around and have the panelists introduce themselves. But panelists, I would love for you to also share to get a little curious about this. If you were to be sitting across from yourself and you were your own coach, what would you be most curious about? And Cindy, do you want to start?
Yes, I can do that. Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy. If I was sitting across me, what would I be most curious about? So I think, like the way I would show up for clients and be really curious about them and all the pieces they're bringing in and what they're navigating. I think I've become more curious about myself. Like, what are parts that I'm good at? What parts that I'm missing out? What are new opportunities showing up for me? I think those are pieces that I would be really curious about. What's on my orientation and implement it. So, it's like that old story. The tailor makes clothes for everyone and not really makes for themselves. I want to have a look at that.
See. Can I go, Tracy?
Yep.
Yes, please.
So welcome everyone joining in. Some familiar names here in the audience. Thank you for tuning in. What would I be curious about? The information which is, very easily accessible, and I'm just thinking of this metaphor of the iceberg, which is about, the 10%, which is just can be seen easily. And I would be very curious to explore the 90% and what part around would, the exploration of what in that 90% would help to reach to the goal. So the invisible, the unseen, the uncomfortable, the road not taken or the road less traveled, how can I, with curiosity, bring it to the awareness for the process of both me and the coach?
And we'd love for all our coaches to share what would come up for them. And the question that Tracy asked, if you were sitting across yourself right now, what would you be most curious about to ask yourself?
And while
And
the
Tracy,
audience
for you?
is reflecting, yeah, exactly. I was saying the same thing, Cindy.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So if I were sitting across from myself, I think what I'd be most curious about is the way that my language might indicate how I'm relating to my goals or sometimes the situation that I'm in. I tend to notice that I use language like um, I should, I shouldn't, I need to, I have to. And so I think I would get curious about that. What's underneath that framing? And the other thing is that I tend to have a little bit of a laugh that comes up, and I'm sometimes curious myself, like, where is this laugh coming from? Because it's often not coming from something that's in that moment funny. So yeah, if I were coaching myself, I would be a little bit curious about those things, and especially as they're relating to what it is that, I'm saying that my goal is. How's that sitting with me based on my language and my nonverbal cues?
Hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's so interesting when we start looking at ourselves as observers. We get to see different aspects. I'm looking over here in the chat. What makes a smart looking person to seek coaching?
Oh,
I love
Want to get smarter.
that.
who is in the
Yes,
process
Yeah.
of becoming smarter.
exactly. There's no limits to smartness or anything really. Um, Always appreciate some humor. So, as we talked about, our topic today is curiosity, and we're doing it through the lens of fascination and uncertainty. And it might be something that you're curious about. Why are we talking about those two things? I want to um, frame this a little bit by the fact that there's been not a lot of research, but at some point, a team of research decided that they were going to do some studies to look at what it is, like what are the factors that make up curiosity, and actually figure out a way to measure it. And before I dig into that, I thought I would put the question out to all of you. What do you think are the underlying desires that motivate curiosity in us? So I'll just pop that into the chat. And if you have a moment to answer that, I'll just share my screen about what these researchers were able to uncover were what they bucketed as 5 distinct dimensions of curiosity. I'm seeing here how to explore the being in me, beautiful, connection. Yes, that's actually one of them. Let me just share my screen and we'll just look at those. So there's 5 dimensions that they came up with that make up curiosity. And this makes up curiosity as a whole. Joyous exploration is one of them, which is like the desire to seek out new information and like the joy that comes with that, right? Wanting to learn and grow and wanting to learn new things to be able to do that. And this has a really high correlation with well-being. Then there's deprivation sensitivity. So that's like the desire to achieve knowledge because you don't want to not know something. There's basically FOMO, a fear of being left out. And so that can be driven by a little bit of anxiety. Then there needs to be some stress tolerance and curiosity, the desire to be independent, the willingness to stay on with uncertainty while we are able to like learn and explore. And this gives us, that connects to being able to tolerate uncertainty, being able to tolerate like having some flexibility. And then there's social curiosity. So one of you mentioned connection. That's definitely here, right? The desire to form meaningful connections with others. And that's motivated by an interest in other people. And then we finally have thrill seeking, the desire to get the most out of life, motivated by taking risks for the sake of taking risks. And we've definitely seen those people. And it reminds me of something Yamini was sharing earlier about like how we see curiosity in cats sometimes. And there's that saying, curiosity killed the cat. And then that might be around that thrill seeking aspect of it. So we're going to be sharing more on this later. We're going to be publishing an article, but just to kind of bring it all together, the researchers came up with basically a personality type. They came up with several personality types for types of curious people. And the one that we're going to be focusing on today, there's others, and we'll share that in the article, are what they call the fascinated. And those are people that are high on all dimensions of curiosity, especially joyous exploration. And those people feel like they can cope in most situations. They have a high amount of emotional, not just emotional intelligence, but emotional regulation. So self-management, essentially. And interestingly enough, these people scored the lowest for feeling that their life was under control, which indicates that they're also have this ability to tolerate uncertainty, which is an important aspect of curiosity. So would love to hear from the audience and even the panelists, which of these feels most connected to the way that you feel motivated to learn something new?
I think many of the points that you mentioned, Tracy, there's an energy around curiosity. And the energy is to explore more, and you begin to feel it inside you. This desire for more, what you're calling joyous. And as you like if you're coaching a client and you observe that in the client, you feel this raised energy of coach and client. And then, there's this curiosity to ask, and notice a smile or your energy has shifted and what's shifting for you. And on that question, more shows up, right? Like how the client is feeling, what they're experiencing at the moment around this illuminated, joyous space. So I think, yeah, lots shows up in the in that exploration and in the later on motivation now to do something new.
Lovely. Spita, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I resonate with what Cindy said about the joyous exploration. We're using the word, fascination, and then there is uncertainty, which is about, a thought comes up as I'm listening to both of you, which is, it's like a fertile ground, and there is opportunity for growth and new to come up there. So and that it is uncertain, but it's also fascinating because we know that there is potential for growth. So that comes up as I'm listening to Cindy.
Yeah, I love that. And that awareness of the potential for growth also brings in that joy again, right? Which is what Cindy was saying, that joy of seeing possibility. Yeah. So, we talked about that profile, the fascinated, and how those people have like high emotional regulation, that they're able to tolerate, they're flexible, they're able to tolerate uncertainty. And we can really see how that ties in with the coaching mindset, which, as we know, is defined as develops and maintains a mindset that's open, curious, flexible, and client-centered. And so obviously curiosity is a big part of that. But curiosity is also mentioned under the competency maintains presence. And Cindy, I'd love if you can share, I know you've actually even written about this. Why specifically is curiosity under presence as opposed to another competency like evokes awareness?
Well, a part of the words of the definition of maintains presence also sits in the definition of embodies a coaching mindset. Yeah. But there's a subtle difference here. Embodies a coaching mindset sits in the domain, the ICF core competencies has 4 domains, sits in the domain of foundation, the work together with ethics, the foundation of coaching, which alludes to how am I developing myself as a coach? How am I growing as a coach? What do I need to show up well as a coach? So it's like all these background pieces that I would do, all this learning around. And when in serving the client, I show up in relationships with the client in that present, in that moment, curiosity would begin to show up. So I develop myself, and like when in front of a client, I show up better and better the more the background work is done. Curiosity sits under, maintains presence, which is the domain of co-creating the relationship. So presence is about, here's a relationship with my client, and together we are co-creating what more needs to show up. The curiosity to learn more about the client, what they are experiencing in the moment, what do they need, what do they want more of, and what all the pieces around how they are making progress, learning, and growth in the session. So one feels like it feeds off the other. I'm developing myself and I show up better for clients. And let's get to the piece that you also asked about, evoking awareness. Now, it's very similar in context. Evoking awareness falls under the domain of communicating effectively. So it's presence gives us the opportunity to be full attention to the client, fully aware of all parts of the client. Evoking awareness, we can offer something more, tools, techniques, silence, etc. Powerful questions. We can offer more to help the client or sister client to come up with more insights on what they want. There's not too much of a difference though, because silence is a tool that helps both. In presence, and again, you would see it in evoking awareness. So the differences are quite subtle.
Mm.
I think I said too much. You go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Cindy, it's, we listen to you all the time and get insights from you all the time, but every time there is a newness that you add in your sharing, which, which triggers some thoughts. So how I am seeing, as to why it's a part of maintains presence and not as a part of, directly under evokes our awareness, like the word curiosity there. Presence, I feel, is so much part of the beingness of the coach. And from that space, being curious creates an environment for deeper insights, for, again, that 90% that I was talking about, where, there is sensing that the coach brings in by being curious, by listening from the space of, the future potential, from the future field of the client. And that is about exploration of the unknown. And curiosity leads to evoking awareness. So by being present and by listening actively, the outcome of that is we are able to ask those questions. And ICF has beautifully used not curiosity in evokes awareness, but questions in evokes awareness. The client questions, the coach questions. So awareness is around the outcome of it. So one is coming from the space of beingness, and the outcome is more like, with the questions, it's more directive. It's more, now the client has come up and explored something unknown, there is an awareness which is evoked.
Yeah, absolutely. That's well said, Smita, because those questions in evokes awareness is grounded in new thinking, new and expanded thinking, new and expanded feelings. So yeah, so now you're directly asking the client what's new for them. Absolutely.
And just adding one more point there, in presence, there is also the word confident. And in my cohort today, we were covering presence there, and we were deep diving into the conversation, saying what is that confidence about? And that's the space where the coach is absolutely confident, and if they are able to demonstrate and be comfortable and confident with the not knowing, how does it
Mm.
impact the presence?
Yeah, that's what was coming up for me as you were saying that confidence comes from being okay with uncertainty, right? Because really not knowing creates a level of uncertainty within us, and we need to be able to be open to that and be confident with that. And I love how because Cindy, when you were sharing earlier, what was coming up for me was this idea of being and then doing, right? And then Smita, you tied that together when you talked about how it comes into evokes awareness. And I was thinking that, like, if we just had curiosity and evokes awareness, coaches could Google lists of like the top most curious questions that we can ask clients, and that would be that would that wouldn't be the curiosity that we look for in coaching, because we have to remember that curiosity comes from fascination, right? And joy. And it's like the joy of the possibility that we see in the client of how they're the fascination of how they're making meaning of their goal, and the joy of thinking about them actually being able to get there. And from there, we're holding the space of curiosity and the questions are coming, as opposed to just focusing on, I need to ask a curious question right now, which makes it a very different energy, right?
Yeah. Kathleen in the chat, thank you, Tracy, and Kathleen has used the word playfulness and curiosity. I think that's such a profound word, and in the conversation, if we can come with that mindset of being playful, then it takes off the pressure, and then there is curiosity. There is no performance pressure as such, which we keep talking about it, but we also feel that, right? Like, while we are working with Cindy on our MCC recordings, we know how it comes in our way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and then I would go, Smita, did you notice what the client was doing with their hands? Presents get dropped. When you put yourself under that kind of anxiety, it dampens your presence.
Yeah. And that's definitely one element of it, right? Or when we're focusing so much on our performance, then it ends up inhibiting the reason that we're there, which is to be there for the other person.
Yeah.
And yeah. Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Cindy and Smita, like, we'd love to hear from both of you because we're all mentors, we're all evaluators. What are you seeing in observed sessions where curiosity is being impacted? What are like the common ways that we're seeing that it's not showing up in coaching?
Hmm. So I can talk about, I'll say this in reference to performance evaluations, where that point we just spoke about, because the coach feels under some kind of performance pressure. This is a good example that some coaches would show up, like they a tourist taking photos and click here, click there, click there, click there, just the curiosity of everything around them. And the depth of going deeper into one part then is missed. It's a missed opportunity to go up and deeper, to notice, has the client said that? there were enough silent spaces between the words, and it didn't get picked up, but it went into another question and another and another. So I think the first point around that, what coaching presence that we notice, is around performance anxiety. And the second one is about, again, what we spoke about, confidence. Like, I've seen many coaches in mentoring would have all this confidence and playfulness and ease about themselves. And the moment they do a performance evaluation recording, like, that takes a back seat. So this confidence is a bit dampened in them. And yeah, I wish I could say, but as much as you can say it, the other person, the other coach has to also feel it within themselves. You can repeatedly say, if you were not so anxious, all of this you would have noticed.
Mm.
And the third piece, I've got to say this not knowing can be quite daunting for especially coaches that are new to the process of coaching. And they read that in the competencies, not knowing. Now, they themselves are fairly new coaches, and yes, fully aware that they don't know everything about coaching. They're still in a learning space. And more practice only gives you more learning and, the skills to do it better. So that sense of not knowing seems to be quite embodied in them as a skill, a lack of a skill, versus the partnering with the client in the space of curiosity of not knowing.
Uh, I think most of the time it is about coaches who are just learning, have started their journey, and in the background, the process is there, the competencies are there. So the focus is on using some of these competencies into action. So the attention is more on the process and not on the person sitting in front of us. So while that performance pressure, how much ever we know, like we also in the conversation, we do also have, I've gone through the MCC training. I've have 3,000 hours. Cindy, you have more than, I don't know how many hours. Tracy, you already have. But we know in the conversation, we would want to be of service to the client, and we would want some kind of an impact on the client. So the process, we want to hold it tight, and there may be, in that need of ours, we may skip something that the client is sharing. So performance is something which it's like a muscle. That the good news is, really, I feel it's like a muscle. How much attention can we pay on it? And conversation after conversation, talking to mentor coaches, getting feedback, reflecting on it, and then we know, we can design our own action steps to work on specifically, say, curiosity, which is part of it. So that's the good news, that it's a muscle and it can be learned. What really comes in the way is, like what Cindy said. I totally agree that you're going to get evaluated, you're going to get mentored, so that there is somebody who's going to mark you on that. It is going to be there. And the other is the attachment that the coach has to the outcome of the conversation. So if the person is at point A and they're wanting to reach to point B, I would really like them to see at that point B, and with my questions, with the awareness that the client can get, the new insights that they can get at point B. So I think the attachment piece is something which really comes in the way of the coach. And how can we work on ourselves as a part of coaching mindset to build that curiosity in us, to that flexible mindset, to be saying that A to B is not just the outcome. A to A point one is also progress. and how can we celebrate that along with the client? So that's my take.
Beautifully said. Because we've seen clients that'll say, like, I want to feel confident by the end of the session. And then sometimes at the end, they say, I've made progress towards confidence, but I still have a ways to go. And it's about our ego if we start feeling like, oh, they didn't get there, right? Meantime, the clients made progress. They've come further than they did at the beginning of the session. And I think that there's sometimes like we talk under maintains presence, it is very specific that our curiosity has to be in service of the client's forward movement, right? But there's a difference between that and, oh, it has to be in service of the client achieving their goal by the end of the session. Those are two very different things. And I've seen what happens in a session is that a coach will ask a question and they'll ask about, the client, a beautifully curious question. Oh, I noticed that you said that, what's coming up for you right now? And then the client shares something that might be a little bit challenging. And the next thing the coach goes to is, how can you overcome this? And so they've dropped their curiosity about whatever it was that's just come up and gone right into problem solving.
I think as a part of our training process, and as we are working on the mindset and the presence as coaches, is to get comfortable in that zone which is messy, which is like so uncomfortable, where we don't know anything. It's just paining. Every part of the body is paining in that by staying in that zone. So can we get comfortable staying in that zone is the point. Tracy, wonderful. Thank you. You've articulated it very well.
And it ties into, sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
I just make one more point about this and you can go on, Tracy. The maintaining presence, is the curiosity offered is in that moment and throughout the session for what the client wants to achieve in the session. I think it's a PCC marker 5.1 and 5.2. So you're actually holding it in the moment lens, looking through the lens, in the moment, everything about the client. And on occasion, you're holding that helicopter view of what the client wants from the session. So it's a beautiful dance between both, right? Just I got you here. In the moment, I hear you, see you, and know everything you need. I can see what it is. And then, of course, the helicopter view of what you want from the session. How are we doing on that?
Cindy and Tracy, there's a beautiful question by Kathleen on the chat. How do you trust? Yeah, go ahead if you want to take it.
No, I was actually gonna actually see if Cindy wanted to speak to that, because you did this beautiful webinar on uncertainty and the I don't know. And I would love to hear you speak on that, Cindy.
So Kathleen, if I can speak directly to you and to all the other coaches on, when in uncertainty, the uncertainty won't go away until we do something different. And a good question to ask yourself is, what is certain inside me? What is certain inside me that will help me navigate this uncertainty? Now, it could be, the inside me could be skills, strengths, abilities, uniqueness. Like, I once heard a coach talk about this uncertainty, and I asked her that question, and she said, "We have good bounce back. I've always had a very good bounce back." So in uncertainties, the one thing you know about you is that you can bounce back from it. So now there's a trust around yourself that you are going to bounce back. That gives you some peace of mind, right? So anytime you experience uncertainty, create a quiet moment for yourself, even if you have to make a cup of tea and that's all quiet, and ask yourself, what's inside me that can help me cope with this uncertainty?
Thank you, Cindy. And just if I can add one point here. So the knowing that it is uncertain is an awareness. So we speak about, the unconscious incompetence to the conscious incompetence. Unconscious incompetence would be bliss, and therefore I don't do anything about it. But with knowing that it is uncertain, I am in that conscious incompetence stage. What do I, from there, what is it that I can pay attention to, which will help me to move from that conscious incompetence to the conscious competence? So, Kathleen, how much did this help?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
beautiful.
Yes.
That's beautiful. And it has me thinking about part of the reason why curiosity is so effective in coaching is that it is moving from the unconscious incompetence to the conscious incompetence and then all the way through, right? Until being consciously competent and then unconsciously competent. And that cycle continues always. The curiosity helps as an enabler for that. So even when something's coming up for the client where they first become conscious of their, I don't love the word incompetence, but it's the one for that framework. We can stay with that, right? We can be curious about that because in there will be some new information that's born from there. And I also wanted to touch on what like Kathleen was saying about the coaching framework, because Cindy, you've always shared that like when we're looking at a coaching framework, we're looking at like, how are we setting the goal at the beginning? And then how are we at the end of the session, framing the session to co-create and design an action or thinking, reflection, and action with a client. And the rest of it is really about the other competencies, right? Trust and presence and all of those things. Would you like to speak a little bit more around that, that approach versus a framework?
Yeah, it's more process because it's like bookmarks, bookends. At the beginning of the session, when the client brings a topic, you and the client together are exploring this topic to come up with a clarity of the agreement. What is it the client wants on the session? And, I'm going to take PCC marker, it's easy to talk to, core competency 3. So if you take the PCC markers, there's only 4 pieces there that makes up, are we establishing agreement with the client? But that competency is worded, establishes, and maintains the agreement. So once the agreement is established, then we move on to, for the rest of the session, how we maintaining this agreement. And PCC Marker 3.4 talks about the issues we're helping the client address, resolve, what's getting in the way. So there's the depth of coaching showing up. Like if the client says 3.4, I know what it is. I know what I need to address today. It's just procrastination. I seem to have this habit or this pattern of procrastinating a lot, even though I know what I want to do. Now, because the client says, I know what I want to do, doesn't mean the coach must dive into, so what action you can take. The coach is not diving into, okay, speak a bit more about this procrastination. How is it showing up that in this X, Y, and Z, and evoking awareness, which just go deeper and deeper. Curiosity, right? The curiosity to engage with the client on their issues. And then as you work through that, the back bookend of facilitate client growth, which is the very essence of coaching. Why are we setting goals? Why is a client bringing some goals and topics to the session? Because they want to make some progress. And that back end is the curiosity to help the client with, or ask questions or invite learnings, what progress a client is making, what are they learning about self, or, or the situation that they brought, how is this learning helping them, the learning of the session helping them in other areas of their life, where else could they apply it? And then, of course, the design of actions, design of any accountability structures they want. And then you doing some lovely acknowledgement to the client for their learning and progress and closing the session. Now, in the next session, that part, facilitate client growth, because it's ongoing sessions, show up right on front. Because you most probably reviewing actions first. So it's this beautiful cycle of week, or every time you meet the client, this ongoing session helps the client navigate their progress to the goal, their desired outcome. So, loosely, you've got two bookends, and in between is all this beautiful presence and listening and evoking awareness that shows up.
So basically, Cindy, what you're saying is curiosity is something which is there as a companion, should be there as a companion throughout.
The session.
Yes.
Absolutely. Throughout the session, right? It's, we talk about curiosity and maintains presence it's only a state of being. It's not. It's not only a state of being, it's the application of what the client is doing. It's what the coach is doing. So core competency 1 and 2 is the being of coaching. The rest of the competencies are the doing of coaching, the being of the coach, and the rest of the competencies are the doing of coaching. So there's something going on here in how the coach is responding to the client, the application of coaching.
And Cindy, you mentioned something earlier, and I'd love to touch on that again because it's something that we've all seen in sessions. You talked about how sometimes you'll notice that there's these questions that are going here, questions that are going there, all through, instead of like a responsiveness to the client and a follow through. And that follow through can still, of course, happen with curiosity. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Your follow-on questions. So if you say to the client, what's most meaningful for you, for example, what would it mean for you if you kept on track with going to gym 3 times a week? And the client gave you this all lovely story about what it means for them. Firstly, that question makes anybody stop and think. It's not like you're going to have instant answers coming out. You're not just telling information here. You have to stop and think about it. What does it mean for you? So the client themselves is going inside, internal. It would mean that my fitness levels will be higher, my energy would be higher, and then go on and on. So the more they talk, the more would show up, right? More thought-provoking would show up in there. Now, if we had to stay on the surface and go, okay, what action do you want to take? You've just missed the follow-on questions about all those lovely pieces that were showing up. For example, the reflectiveness of client as they were sharing what it means for them. Or maybe an occasional a smile that showed up, or something more like body cues. A better word, the unspoken. Yeah? And you only engage with where you think the next question should be on the surface. Then in Smita's example, we didn't really go below the iceberg.
Yeah.
This also, makes me, go ahead. So the curiosity part, if it is just about the what, it might not help the process and the client. I'm just building on to what you're saying, Cindy, bringing in the who and the what concept to be saying that how can that curiosity be triggered in the client to know more about themselves in the process.
Absolutely.
There can be unlimited discussions around the what, and we may just get caught up in all the what that the client is sharing. What around the who can really, make them intrigued to find out more, to know more, and make them curious. And I was just reading just one line somewhere, it just came up saying, curiosity has a neuroscience impact, and the way that it was written there is like when we are hungry, and the chemicals in the brain that come up looking at food is the same as when a person is given that curious question. It's the same kind of reward that the brain gets.
Mm.
And I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. I mean, can the clients, for us asking those questions, really receive that as gift rather than feeling that, oh my God, now I have to do all the hard work with this new exploration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that you brought that in, because it's something that I've shared sometimes with my cohorts, is that we don't want to just ask a question that we don't know the answer to. We want to also ask a question that the client probably doesn't know the answer to. And that's when we're getting into the who. Otherwise, we're staying with the what. What did that person say next? Like that's the kind of thing that's very, very motivated by a situational thing, as opposed to like, how are you receiving that? Right?
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
mentoring recently. It's a mentoring conversation example. So the client is a leader with 25 years of experience. A client who's going through the coach training program, and is talking about the challenges of getting into the practice of meditation, and how the client is not able to carve out 10 minutes of their time for meditation. And of course, this is a new coach and they've just started. We can't really expect without, having good practice with the questions and stuff. And the coach goes deep into the schedule of the client. So the client is talking about, oh, I get up at 5 to 5:30, this, then that, and like the whole lot of schedule till 10 p.m. And the coach goes the next question, you didn't talk anything about 7 a.m. to 7:30. I'm curious what's happening there.
Oh gosh.
And so it's like, you added the word curious because we are teaching to be curious. However, what am I curious about? What is it that I need to be curious about, which can help the client to find a new answer for, their goal?
Yeah, because here's the thing, right? If a client was thinking about going to gym and they were thinking about it for 6 months and they started something and they wasn't successful at keeping the schedule of three days a week, and they came back to the coach and raised the same topic, I can tell you nobody would know more than that client about everything they need, why they need to go to gym or everything about gymming. All that info they would know.
Yeah. And I think that's something that sometimes coaches lose track of, is that evokes awareness is all around new thinking, new feeling, new
Yes.
perceptions, new beliefs, so it's not about the client analyzing their existing thinking. I mean, sure, that's a part of it, but it's also that we're going to move beyond that into some new ways of thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to touch on, and then we can look at some practices to help develop our curiosity, is another thing that I see come up happen is that the coaches ask questions that like seem very curious on the surface, right? Like, what are your beliefs? What are your values around this? And those, of course, they can be great questions to ask, but oftentimes the client's already shared something that could have indicated a value, that could have already indicated a belief. And Cindy, one of the things that I saw in the chapter that you shared with me was around how we want to be responsive. So it's like if the client's already said something, I said at the beginning about how I use the language I should, right? that indicates quite possibly that there's a belief lingering in there, right? And so asking about that can help surface the belief as opposed to just saying, so what underlying belief do you have about going to the gym or why you're not going to the gym?
Absolutely. Or mindset, if they raise procrastination or something, it could be right. But you're spot on, because the point you're making is that the client may have already said it, and we just didn't pick it up. We were not paying full attention to the client to take that info and link it into our questioning.
Yeah. And that's where we come back to that need for fascination. Because if we're holding that, think about people we're fascinated in. We're almost like holding our breath. We're like every word they are saying, we're holding on to, you know? That's kind of how we need to be with our clients, not holding our breath, but enraptured by them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Sminta, you spoke about curiosity being a muscle, and I love that analogy. I'd love if we can just share, what is it that we do? What is it that both of you do to build an audience as well, to build that muscle, that curiosity muscle, even outside of coaching?
Mhm. So, as a practice, just reflecting on the conversations to be saying that, I asked this question, like, where did this come from? Okay? Where did this question come from, and what purpose did it serve the client? I think that constant, reflection really helped to say that if I have to operate and if I'm really working on that muscle of mine as a coach, as a coach who's already accomplished one credential, nothing to do with credentials, but I'm just saying that, as we progress with our experiences in conversation, it's really not a destination, right? It's really like a journey. And can we keep on it, considering it as a journey, to be saying, how can my questions improve in a way in the service of the client, and so that the client starts getting the reward that curiosity can give, right? So I think reflection has really helped me for where I have reached, and it's a continuous practice that I do. And it's really not about when I'm wearing the hat of a coach is where I'm working on that muscle. In the regular day-to-day conversations, how can really the questions be the tone of the questions, the choice of the words that the question will have? How can that be in such a way where it is coming from the space of authentic curiosity? I'm not trying to paint it as a curious question, but it is coming from the space of curiosity, so that the other is able to, again, there is an intent behind that authentic curiosity, saying that, like, how can the other person be, that the thought in that can be evoked and they can find new answers with this curious space.
Lovely. Cindy?
I think my curiosity just gets better and better the more I engage with coaches. So I'm ever grateful for that, the diversity of coaches I engage with. Because somebody would say something and then it would be sitting with me like, okay, this is quite interesting. I've never heard this before. With regards to a particular competency, bullet point, or something like that, or even their own uniqueness, which then creates a space for me to, think about and expand my own how I show up, my own learning or how I show up. And I think it's an ongoing process of how you're paying attention to self that embodies a coaching mindset that eventually you feel confident to coach or to, it doesn't matter what it is. You can just show up being your authentic self, right? Like at any platform, any given time, I'm quite happy to coach. But that comes with a lot of background work throughout the years on self. Self with others, of course, not just self, self with others. And of course, if I don't know, I don't know. I just engage or co-partner with my client in what we don't know and where we're going to go next.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like what you were saying about that self, right? It's self with others, but for me, it always has to come back to self. Like, so I have to be curious about my own way of thinking. What's
Mm,
underneath this thought, and to kind of challenge my thoughts a little bit. Why does this keep showing up for me? I've noticed that I've had this thought repeatedly, and instead of trying to force it out, kind of look at like what's underneath that, or how am I feeling right now, or what's behind my need to like prove something with another person, and I've I have to admit, when I was doing some research around curiosity and I came around that one that's like driven by FOMO, I'm like, oh my God, that's me. Like I have this need to learn and to know everything, and I realize that I need to have some joy around still having things to learn. I'm never going to learn it all. And that's amazing, right? So
mm,
having this like joy about discovering that there's something new. If we don't have that, we become jaded. And yet we seem, or at least I do, seem to want to reach this point where it's like, I know everything. And really it's about understanding about I know nothing. And I think that really
yeah,
ties into Andy's comment here about like being empty.
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Any last words that you both want to share? Audience, panelists.
It says maintains presence. The competency is maintains presence. It doesn't say 100% perfect presence, because none of us will have that in a coaching session. On occasion, we're going to lose our presence, but you should be able to recognize when that is happening, when you're losing presence, and how to maintain it again. Like, I'll give you a tip. One of the easiest way for me when I know I'm losing presence in a session is to ask an open-ended question. So the client will do more talking, and I'll quietly ground myself. Like, quietly take a few breaths or something that'll ground me, and my presence is back up again.
Mm.
My closing thoughts. Yours, Smita?
I think that what else question is that like a short question to maybe, Cindy, when you're talking about giving yourself that space and to ground, we can just ask for the client to reflect on with that what else question. And I love that, that's what I was telling you, Tracy. Every time you have this conversation, Cindy is going to give you a new element to think. So the maintains presence, it's really about knowing how to maintain, and I think it's like if I can consider myself as work in progress, then I am also, curiously working with myself to know more, to learn more. So that's my last closing comments, to say that it cannot just also happen, just when you are in the conversation. It's like that muscle which, we'll have to spend some time every day, some reflection every day to build that muscle.
Yeah. Beautiful. And that just sort of speaks to like something that we talked about in a previous webinar. It's like presence isn't perfection, right? And even curiosity, there's nothing, we have to let go of perfection. We have to come back to that messiness that we talked about earlier. There's going to be some of that, but as long as it's motivated by a genuine interest in the other person and the joy in the possibility of them actually moving forward, that's what's going to keep us anchored. So somebody once told me about something else that I was talking about. They said it's not a destination, it's an energy. And I'm feeling that about curiosity as well. It's an energy that we need to embody, and we're going to lose touch with it from at times, and we just need to keep coming back.
Yeah. And it's quite simple. Human nature is curious. people are curious by nature. That's human beings, right? So we can just develop it, grow that muscle more and more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like we're coming back to our essence.
Absolutely. Coach, it's lovely being with you. And Tracy, thank you for hosting and moderating. Smita, always a pleasure to chat
Absolutely.
and
Thank you,
ponder.
everyone.
Thank you, Tracy and Cindy. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.